All right, so we're gonna go ahead and jump in here with chapter 6, part 1 on reading level 2. Now, previously in the courses, I had actually pushed this to kind of the end of the class because sort of the way it is in the starter, it's a little bit more of an advanced topic, reading level 2. However, because of the number of live trading examples that you're gonna see in chapters 7, 8, 9, and 10, it really makes sense for me to teach you about level 2 here so you can better understand those examples. So first, we're going to begin with a bit of a refresher on what you already learned in the starter class. So why is level 2 important? Well, as a day trader, you will have a huge opportunity if you're able to read level 2 in the time and sales window correctly. These skills may not be necessary for swing traders, may not be necessary for longer term day traders that hold positions for hours, perhaps more trend-based trading. But for those short little intraday opportunities where your goal is to capture 10 cents a share, something like that, 10, 20 cents, that's where you need to be precise, and that's where you're going to really want to have the level 2 in time and sales as a tool to assist you. So learning to read level 2. I would reiterate here that reading the tape, reading level 2 is only helpful on the right type of stock to trade. So if I pull up, ZVZZT here, this is our NASDAQ test stock, reading the level 2 on this is not going to be helpful at all. But even if we look at a stock like General Motors or General Electric or something like that, generally reading the tape on these stocks, their percentage gain on the day is minimal. These are not going to be stocks that are particularly helpful to read the level 2 on. And similarly, if a stock is in sideways consolidation, anything you see on the level 2 that may be indicative of a possible reversal or a possible big seller or something like that, well, it's already in consolidation, so it doesn't really make a difference. So we really want to be focusing on looking at the level 2 on a stock as it's approaching its breakout point. And it has to be on a stock that has high relative volume, where there's a lot of volume. High relative volume, generally we look for a higher amount of total volume as well. And that's not always the case. Sometimes lower total volume is okay if it's high relative volume. But again, based on chapter 3, the right type of stock to trade. So apply reading level 2 to the right type of stock to trade. And just as a refresher, which we'll just breeze through here, this is just the quick breakdown that we went through in the starter of what the level 1 market quotes look like. So of course, on every level 2 window, we have the stock symbol up at the top, stock symbol. Up at the top row, we have some information which is customizable. This is the percentage gain on the day, This here shows the exchange, whereas Sterling, as you recall, or may recall, let me just open up the Sterling platform, shows the gain down at the bottom of the window, sort of like down here. So this will show N down here, a Q for NASDAQ, N for NYSE, A for American Exchange, Amex. I'll just move this window out of the way for now. And then total volume on the side. And remember that the volume is, they always sort of abbreviate with, adding the K instead of adding the additional zeros. So that's very common. We know that we've got our, when we get into the first row of level 1 market data, we've got our market maker on the left, the price in the middle, size on the far side, and then it's an exact duplicate of that, both on the bid and then on the ask. The difference between the bid price and the ask price is what's called the spread. So in this example here, we've got a buyer at 225, and we have a seller at 226. Now, typically, we would think of the person that's selling as someone who already owns shares. They're listing them for sale. But remember, a short seller who doesn't already own shares could be putting a sell order up there to then sell someone else's shares as a borrow, right? Because they sell and then they have to buy back. So we'll talk about the difference between buying and selling at the bid and the ask in a moment. We've got our market makers here, which is the actual financial institution that's routing the order to the market. So when we talked about, and I think we touched on this a little bit in the starter class, the purpose of order routing. So the market is an island. All right, so if we think of the market as an island, oops, I gotta make my camera a little bit bigger here. There we go, that looks better. So if we think of the market as an island, this is an island that has many different paths onto the island. So we could consider them bridges. And you've got sort of the slow bridge, which is our traditional smart routing with most kind of retail brokers, it's adequate, but it's not high speed. Then you've got the express lane, the super fast routing, but you've got to pay, have your easy pass, you have to pay a toll for that smart routing. So choosing your route is definitely an important component of your workflow of being a trader. I mean, you have to decide, how am I going to route my orders from me sitting right here at my desk to the actual market, to the island? So I like to use the bigger routes. There's a lot of different routes that you could choose from. At Lightspeed, if I do the drop down here, these are all the different routes that are currently available, and I could email them and ask them to enable additional routes if there was a specific one that I knew they had that they just hadn't enabled on my account, and they could enable that. Generally speaking, my feeling is ARCA, NASDAQ, EDGX, and BATS, those are the big ones. And so generally speaking, if you route through one of the big ECNs, there's a good chance that they're already sitting on the bid or the ask, which means you'll get almost an instantaneous execution. So in the case here of this stock, CHCI, you've got EDGX on the bid, EDGX on the ask. So if I route through EDGX, I'll immediately get shares. Now you see NASDAQ is jumping around here. NASDAQ's pretty close. It's at 38. ARCA is down here at 42. It's jumping around a little bit. Now you could choose, if you wanted to actually click on, and you can enable this, you could actually click on the different name of the ECN, and then by doing that, you can set it so it'll change what you have set here. Now I actually don't have it set that way, but I could go in here and go to mouse, and under market, let's see, I believe it's under market, set to, I think automatic is the way to do it. Yeah, so see how I'm clicking the different one and it's changing it there? So, you could do that, and, that's going to route very, very quickly. Now, one of the things with all of these market makers is that if I send an order right now to NASDAQ, you'd think, okay, he's right, or she's, whatever, they're right there at 1080, whatever it was, 1090. Well, if I send to ARCA, or let's just say I send to, EDGX. EDGX is up here at 85. Does that mean I'll get filled at 85? And the answer is no. They will always reroute your order to the current best market. They have that obligation. So the process of that quick reroute can slow down your order a little bit. But again, all of my hotkeys are set up just to send through NASDAQ. I have changed to NASDAQ from previously using EDGX and at other times using ARCA. So every now and then you'll get a warning on your computer, on your trading platform. It's usually like up here. They'll give you a little message and they'll say, ARCA is offline today. They're having an issue, so route your orders over to, route away from ARCA. And then you route away from ARCA and you use NASDAQ. So then you have to go in on that day and change all your hotkeys. All right, so you change your hotkeys, now you're routing through NASDAQ. You save your layout, and the next day you just keep using NASDAQ. And then one day NASDAQ has an issue, and then I change all my hotkeys to EDGX. And that's usually the only time I ever change them, is if there's an issue with the platform or an issue with a route. And I haven't had an issue with NASDAQ in such a long time. That's how my hotkeys have stayed. So anyways, you could, if you wanted to, sort of change these for the point and click. It doesn't make a huge difference because they're really very, very quick. Now, a true market maker is a financial institution that holds shares of the stock and provides liquidity to the market by sitting on both the bid price and the ask price. And so they sell across the spread to turn a profit, and that's their compensation for the risk of holding stock. Now, before decimalization, the minimum spread was 6.25 cents. And so every time they would pass 10,000 shares across the spread, they would make $625. After decimalization, the conversion of the stock market from a fraction system to pennies, the minimum spread became 1 penny. And that was very concerning for a lot of these market makers who felt that now their incentive for holding the shares, that's only $100. You just cut it by it's 1/6 now of what it was, and that was previously a worst case scenario. So at best case scenario, they were maybe getting a 25-cent spread. So the spreads have gotten a lot tighter, and that's good for retail traders. It's good for liquidity, but it was not as great for market makers. So what we see more often here are ECNs, which is simply the electronic pathway to the market: NASDAQ, Amex, NYSE. NASDAQ again, like I said, is the one that I really like to use. Amex, NYSE, those are just the ECNs that you can route the orders to, and it's just a communication pathway, just orders going through. All right, so now getting into the level 2 quotes, this is where we see the depth of the market. And I'll tell you from when I do some of these kind of examples and I pull up a stock like this and I kind of shrink it down to just the level 1 and I actually hide the time and sales kind of little thing right there. When this is all I can see, I feel blind. I feel like I cannot tell what's happening. And so what that tells me is that I've become very dependent on utilizing level 2 to understand market sentiment, to help me predict the direction that a stock is going to trade in. So when I pull this down here, and all of a sudden I see the depth of the market, and I can see the tape, now I can see so much more. And so level 2 market depth, it really truly is the depth of the market, okay? This is where we see all the buyers and all the sellers, and each order as it goes through the tape. And this little sentence here is essentially what I just said. So we can just jump to the next slide. What I want to talk about here is the color scheme, just in brief, because we did touch on it, but sometimes people get confused about the colors and why is it, why are there 4 rows of green on this side? There's only 2 rows on that side. What is this? Well, there's 3 rows of red there. There's only 2 rows there. I don't understand. So each color row, and it could be 3 rows, it could be 2 rows, but each block of colors is tier. All right, so the closest tier to the market is always green, based on this color scheme. Now you could change your color scheme in the settings if you want to, but this is standard. This is what E-Trade uses. This is what a lot of brokers use. So green is at the top, and that's the closest tier to the market. So the best buyer, the best bid is green. And in this case, we have actually 4 buyers all at 225. So they're all at the same price, and the order that they'll get filled in is whoever was first to place the order there. So you've got these 4 orders all here at the same price. And then there's 2 orders on the ask side at 26, which is the best price on the sell side. Now you've got 3 orders at 27, which is the second best price, so it's a red tier. There's 2 at 24, second best price on the bid side, so it's a red tier. And then you've both got 1 and 1 at 23 and 28, and then you've got a few more that are grayed out. Over in my platform here, my color scheme it's the same, except that mine after blue goes to gray, and on Sterling, after blue, it cycles back to green, which personally I don't like, but it's not really a big deal because we don't usually look that far down the level 2 anyways. On some platforms, well, I suppose on a lot of platforms, you could pull the level 2 window down to the full size of the screen and potentially see orders way, 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 way down and way, 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 way up. I personally don't find that helpful. So what's kind of interesting actually about my quotes here is that this looks like a level 2 window, and it's a level 2 window, but I'm actually using level 1 quotes. At one point, I emailed Lightspeed, and when I set up my market data, I thought that I was subscribing to NASDAQ Total View. NASDAQ Total View is the full book, so it's every NASDAQ order all the way down, as far as they go. And then you can subscribe to that full book depth for the other routes as well, or for the other markets. So for Amex and for NYSE. So you get the full book depth. Now, if you do that, you're going to see this is going to stretch out, and you're going to see a million orders all the way down. You can stretch this for 4 monitors, and you still see orders. And you can see mine is very consolidated. So what I actually realized after, I don't know, a couple of years of trading was that they never actually gave me NASDAQ Total View. I don't know, and I didn't realize it at the time because I always had my windows really kind of small like this. So it seemed a little smaller, but I didn't really think a lot of it. In fact, what I have is called level 1, and it's the top of book. So I have everything that's at the top of the book. And so I actually saved some money on my quotes. And it can be a problem sometimes because there could be a big seller here at 50, and I don't see it because I'm only seeing the top of the book, right? I'm seeing 1044. So I don't see that big seller that's there at 50. But then when it comes up to 47, 48, 49, 50, it'll appear because at that point, it becomes the top of the book. Now, when I did my last small account challenge, I used Sterling, and I told them to set me up with NASDAQ Total View. I said, I want Total View. They're like, okay, fine. So they set me up with NASDAQ Total View, and I started using it, and I was like, what the heck is this? There's so much more data than I am used to seeing what's going on. And they're like, well, what are you currently using? And I then at that point got the clarification that I was actually using top of book. And I said, well, gosh, now I feel weird about this because I feel like I should be using NASDAQ Total View. But when I tried trading with it, I felt like it was too much information. So I said, you know what? Let's not ruin a good thing. I'm making money trading. Let's just switch to the top of book. And so they switched to top of book, and that's the feed that we have right here for you guys as well. For people that are using the Warrior Simulator here, you have top of book. So I find that it's perfectly adequate. Again, there are instances where I do wonder if maybe seeing that total view would have maybe kept me out of a trade. And it's not that you don't see anything further down. You do see some stuff further down, but it's just not everything. So I feel like I'm getting pretty much what I need. So anyways, that's a quick explanation of both the color scheme and my quotes and the way I have them set up. So when you first pull up a stock, you can very quickly see, like with CHCI, I think this is a 2 million share float. You can very quickly see whether a stock is a 2.17 million share float. Very thinly traded stock. In contrast is ZZAN. Look at that huge seller there. Big buyer on the bid, 68,000 shares. There was a seller on the ask side, I think 75 of 100,000 shares. And this would be an example where that NASDAQ Total View, that seller has gone away, but only because of my view. So, this is one of those times where, but in any case, I can immediately see just by looking at the level 2 that this, and the seeing that the float is what it is, that I wouldn't trade this anyway. So it's probably not a big deal. You guys have to make the decision for yourself whether or not you want to subscribe to those additional. So there he's back at. Actually, so maybe that person pulled their order and now they've got the new order at 130,000 shares. But that's not uncommon when you have a really big float stock. You're going to have more institutional traders that are trying to work their way in and out of the stock, especially when it's up 40% on the day. So we can pretty quickly identify a more thinly traded stock, a lower float stock. These are the types that can move very, very quickly. When we have a catalyst, these things can rip. Even sometimes without a catalyst, a pure technical breakout, these can also really rip. So the thinly traded stocks are ones that we often look at very closely. Thickly traded stocks, your 10 billion share float stocks, Bank of America, Ford Motor Company, and Sirius Satellite Radio. These are companies that have raised so much money. Sirius Satellite Radio, they had to send satellites up into outer space. So they had to raise a lot of money to do that. So, those types of companies have very, very thick level 2s and are kind of useless to read because they're so thick. But the benefit here is that by pulling up that level 2, if you pull up the level 2 right now of 10 stocks, and, let's just say you could pull up CHCI. On the day you pull it up, maybe, who knows, some of these may end up changing stock symbols or getting delisted. But if you pull up Bank of America, you pull up Ford, you pull up SIRI, SIRI, then you pull up Tesla, then you pull up maybe Beyond Meat, BYND, you pull up, what's another one, X, US Steel, you pull up XOM, Mobile, you start looking at how each of these have different level 2s. And so you start to learn that pattern. And that means when I see a stock hit one of my scanners, I can very quickly pull the stock up and ZZAN within a second be like, wait a second, I don't know. So sometimes a scanner will tell you the data could be wrong. It could say it's a 2 million share float stock and you pull it up and you see, I guess, what ZZAN looks like and you're like, wait a second, I don't think so. That doesn't look like a 2 million share float stock. I can tell just by looking at it. And so that gives you that sort of ability to cross-check your data. A higher float stock like Bank of America, we're very rarely going to be day trading them. Occasionally on the large cap side, you'll see, and this segues nicely here, you might see some of the large cap traders trade those stocks on days that they're volatile. But generally speaking, that's not my strategy. We have a large cap room and a small cap room here, but realistically they could probably be called the low float room and the medium float room. Because in the large cap room, they usually are trading, if they're trading Tesla, we could check the float on it. The Tesla float right now, let's see, I'm gonna have to check it on this computer. It's not a crazy high float. So the float's 750 million shares. It's high, but it's not crazy high. Facebook, the float is 2.3 billion shares, so that's got a bigger float. Beyond Meat, BYND, the float's 35 million shares. But we never trade that in the small cap room. We don't trade BYND because of sort of the price. So, in the small cap room, we're usually focusing on lower float stocks. 35 million shares would be fine, but usually a float of under 100 million shares. And typically with a price of under $20, $30. Although occasionally we'll have a stock that rips from 20, 30 to 40, 50, 100, and we'll keep trading it because it's still behaving like a small cap stock. In the large cap room, they're usually focusing more on sort of that medium float range, 50 to 100 million shares, 50 to 500 million. They're a little bit more thickly traded. They're usually household name stocks that you're a little bit more familiar with, a little bit more expensive, and those are stocks that can be they're harder to take those really quick day trades on because they can be choppier. They have more institutional traders, both in high frequency trading algorithms and in actual institutions that are holding large positions that, someone gets an order, hey, Anthony, sell the BYND, sell the Beyond Meat right now, market order, sell it. So Anthony's like, oh my God, I got to sell this order. So he's working that's Anthony at the hedge fund. He punches a sell order, he sells it, and all of a sudden you see a blip flush as someone, unloads 25,000 shares and it just dips down. And so because those will happen more and more frequently on higher institutional ownership type of stocks, you start to see choppiness. It starts to pop up and then all of a sudden it flushes. The chart patterns sometimes become a little bit disconnected because you have people trading that aren't even looking at the charts. Whereas usually the retail traders that are focusing on the small cap stocks, we're trading them because we're looking at the chart. That's what we're focusing on. We're not getting a call from someone that's just buy, just sell. That's not really the way small caps trade. So with large caps, level 2 may not actually be as important. And in fact, Roberto, who's a member of the 100K Club, he trades without using level 2 at all, which is impressive to me, but he's trading large caps. So it can be done, absolutely. Now, I do think that level 2 could help him, and I know he knows how to read it, but he chooses not to use it, and it's working for him, so, hey, if it's working, don't mess with it. So just for reference there. So for some of you who may feel that, that this is a little over your head, I would encourage you to stick with it because I think it's valuable regardless. But over in the large cap room, you may find that some of these nuances and sort of nitty gritty things are not actually as significant as they are here. All right, so what do I look for in level 2? So the second a stock hits my scanner, so, stock hits my scanner, whether it's the Gap scanner or the High Day Momo scanner. So, CHCI hits my scanner. First thing I do is, usually my workflow, just to comment on this again, is because I use eSignal for charting, I'll type in the stock here. So if I type it in, it usually takes a second to load. So I'll type it in, and then while I'm typing it in, I drag my mouse over to here and type in the quote. The quote loads instantly. So I load the chart, let it load, and then by the time I'm on the quote, now I've got both up at the same time. So the first thing that I'm looking at is I'm looking at the thinness or thickness of the market. This is clearly a thinner market. This is a stock that I can tell can move quickly from 13 up towards probably 12. Wouldn't take too much from 11, 13, 11, 14, and then quickly up. It's got right now about a 13-cent spread. So I see the spread, and look at how it's jumping around. There's 18 to 20, then 30. So this tells me right now that if I was in it and it's got 2 million shares of volume. I check the volume usually as well. Sometimes I forget to, but I try to remember. So if I was in this right now, there's not a lot of volume going through. If I was trying to sell it, I'd probably have a little bit of a hard time selling. I mean, look, we're not seeing a lot of transactions going through here. So if I had an order to sell at 19, I would fill 100 shares, 200, 300, but not a lot. Now it pops up to 20, 30, but on only a few hundred shares of volume, realistically. So this tells me that this is a more thinly traded stock. Now, if I buy right at the ask price, I could get in. I might get a little slippage, right? I mean, if I click the buy button right here at 19 and I wanted to buy 10,000 shares, I wouldn't fill all 10,000 at 19. That wouldn't happen because unless there's a hidden seller, it wouldn't happen. We'll talk about hidden sellers in a moment. So most likely that won't happen. So I would have to move my order up, maybe 10 cents to allow a little slippage. Which is fine. Slippage is the difference between kind of the current market and what you actually get filled at. So yeah, so on this one, I look at the spread. I look at the number of market makers on each side. It's not stacked. We have a stack is when, like the example of GM or what maybe we would see on Zizan. A stack is when we see, a good number, 5 or more is what I would sort of say stacked. Usually as stocks go right into a halt, they get stacked on the bid as they're halting up or stacked on the ask as they're halting down. So Zizan has a little bit of a stack here at 58. That's a stack. That's what I would call a stack. And that's just an expression that I use, but I'm sure other people use it too. Anyway, so, but you certainly don't see that on CHCI. So we've got the spread, the number of market makers on each, basically the number of market makers on each tier. Not in total, but on each tier. So on each tier, we only have 1 and 1, whereas Zizan's got 2 and, like 5 or 6 or 7. Then I look to see how close together the market depth tiers are. So this goes 104, 109, 120, whereas this one goes 56, 57, 58. Those are penny, 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 very tight, whereas this one is spread out. Now that tells me if I did do that market order, or I used 10,000 shares with a 10-cent offset, I'd probably fill up to 1120. Whereas if I did that on Zizan, I probably wouldn't get that much slippage. So just by looking at the level 2, I can sort of predict how much slippage I may get if I try to buy it. And then I look for big bids or big asks. All right, now, yeah, you have to be careful when you say that. You don't want to tell the wrong person that you're looking for a big ask, because they might misinterpret what you're saying. But looking for a big bid and a big ask. All right, so the big numbers there, when I see that, they stand out for me. So as a momentum trader, I am primarily looking at the ask and the tape while I'm in a trade or about to get out of a trade. So my eye is right in this area. I'll talk about that in just 1 second. But let's look at those big bids. Well, in this case, this is a big ask. 27,000 shares at 95. So if I was thinking about buying that, and all of a sudden I see a 27,000 share seller there on the level 2, that for me is going to be an indicator. Wait a second. Let me wait for just a moment, because there's a big seller there. So let me see if it starts to get bought up. So if I start to see green on the tape, and I start to see it go 27, 26, 25, 24, 23, 22, 21, I'm seeing buyers coming in. Now if it goes 19, 18, 17, 16, 15, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, what's going to happen is as soon as it breaks, it's like a floodgate. It's like a dam, cracking, and then, and so it's two things happening there. While on the one hand, a big seller by itself is bearish because it's someone's selling. On the other hand, if the stock has the strength with all that volume and all of those green orders on the tape to break through it, that's showing a lot of strength. And so that's sort of the paradox of seeing a big seller, but then being able to interpret it on the one hand in strength or on the other hand in weakness. On the bid side here, we don't have really anything. Well, down at 56, there's a 20,000 share bid. So this one's a little further down, but I wouldn't care about that. Now, sometimes in the case of this chart, you could see how we have a double top up here around like 250. So if we already had a chart pattern that showed a double top, and then we also see the big seller right at like 48 or 49, or really right at that level, then that big seller is sort of reaffirming that resistance that is there on the chart. So it's important to recognize that a lot of traders will throw out orders around those psychological levels. People just, I'll sell it if it hits 8. I'll sell it if it hits 850, 10, whatever. And sometimes people unwinding large positions will just put them out every 50 cents or whatever. So it's not uncommon that you'll see them. Now, in my trading, we'll talk about this a little bit more in chapter 6. I have the option to hide my shares. So if I'm hiding my shares like this with a hidden order, my order will never show as a 27,000 share order on the ask. Even if I'm selling 27,000 shares, it won't show a thing. It'll show nothing. You have the right to not basically show your cards to the market, because by showing your cards to the market, if you're trying to sell, you're essentially hurting your own position by the negative sentiment that comes with a big sell order. And so you're allowed to hide your shares. Now, if you hide your shares, we may see and identify that there's a hidden seller, which would be the case that, or an example where there might only be 1,000, shares listed, but you're seeing tons of green going through, clearly far more than 1,000 shares, but the price isn't breaking. So when we see lots and lots of green, and there's not a countdown like 27, 26, 25, 24, 23, there's just, 10 shares there, or 1,000, it's because we add the 2 zeros, then that's when you realize, okay, there's a hidden seller. And the question is, with an iceberg hidden seller order like that, you never know how big it is. It could be, I think I drew a little diagram. Here you go. It could be 5,000 shares and there's 45,000 underneath the surface. You don't know. We never know when we have that type of situation. So for that reason, when I identify a hidden seller, sometimes I'll give it a second to break, but I will be a little bit more cautious. We'll see a lot of examples of that in the live trading archive, so we'll get to more detail on that. So watching the big orders get bought up, that's that interesting pattern that we see, and that will often attract new traders and generate a pop when the order is filled, especially when it's a break through a critical resistance level. And I can't tell you how many trades I've had where, we've had a critical resistance level. We had it yesterday on OCGN. OCGN pre-market, let's see. So let me just back this up. So pre-market had a high of 970. So, lo and behold, it comes up to 970 and there's a big seller there. Makes sense. And then all of a sudden it goes, that traditional, it was like 50,000 shares. It goes 50, 40, 30, 20, 19, 18, 17, 16, 54. And then boom, rips through that level, squeezes up to 1088, $1 a share, almost instantaneously. So by reading the level 2 and seeing that pattern was occurring, I was able to jump in and capitalize on that move. So let me actually show you a live example of this here. Let's see. So this is going to be an example. It's not the best example, but it's fine. So this is the stock we're focusing on here, MTSL. The seller is going to be, I believe, at 49 or 50. I'm in at 49. I got in for the break of the $0.50. So watch as we come up. Lots of green on the tape. There you go. So we've got a 90,000 share seller. Okay, so, but it's up 69% on 5.4 million shares of volume. So 90,000 shares is not the end of the world. And watch it, 86, 79. So it's 71. So it's starting to get bought, but then there's some people that are like, I don't know, it's a big seller. So we're seeing some people just, selling at 49. Or what sometimes people will do, some people selling at 47. Some people might say, oh, big seller at 50, I'm going to tuck an order in and sell it at 49. Just kind of carve 1 cent inside that ask. That's not uncommon. We'll talk about that with hotkeys, how to do that. I occasionally will do that if I need to get out of a position and I see something like this. But in this case, I'm not in full size. I'm adding. I'm liking this for the break of the level. And on the chart here, we're kind of at the we had a first 5-minute candle to make a new high, and it wasn't perfect, but we're basically at high a day, and I'm looking for that squeeze up towards 4. So here, it hit that level, $0.50, psychological resistance, big seller. Now it's pulling back off it. Now it's back to it, 50. So we're going to do the countdown. There's 50,000 on the ask. Little stack there. Some people hit the bid. They bail out. Now we've got 49. So 47 right now. 49. 50, 48,000, 44. Here we go. 41. Now 38, 31. See how it starts to pick up as it starts to come down to the bottom? Because a lot of people like me will wait for it to start to thin out. Now think, if you were short, you might say, okay, I'm going to hold it. Look, there's a 90,000 share seller. I'm going to hold it short. My stop is going to be at 51. And now as you see it starting to get bought up, you might think, you know what, maybe I better just get out now before it breaks. And so you have a combination of people who are short, getting out, buying to cover, and you have people buying for the breakout. And watch what happens when this breaks. Immediately pops to 70, immediately up to 70. Now it comes down to 60. There's a seller at 60. And I actually put out an order to take profit at 60 because generally for this type of trade, when we get that snap through a level, I like to take some off the table because you don't know. Sometimes they do a false break. They'll go to like, well, the countdown could go 90,000 down to 0. And then when it looks like it's about to break, it reloads to 90,000. So that's not good. Sometimes it'll break and go to like 53 or 54, and then there's another 90,000 shares. And now people that bought just for that breakout, you haven't gotten enough profit, and then you just say, all right, the stock is too thick, I'm done. So because of the risk of a false breakout, I'll often take a little profit off the table into that snap. Now, if it ends up that's a big snap and it goes right to 375, 380, in that case, I'd actually be more likely to add because now I'm already up so much, and the fact it moved that much is going to even just attract more traders, and that's where we're going to look for that squeeze to 4. So, but we'll talk about that more when we get into strategy. And this is a good example there of what ended up being a false breakout. So it's a good thing that, took the profit on that break because now, just like that, it's back down. All right, so that's the example though, and you'll see a bunch. There's so many examples of that pattern when we get into more of the live examples. So here's a big seller on the ask. No doubt that's a huge seller. You'd be able to identify that immediately. Here's a big buyer on the bid right there. There's the same seller on the ask that we looked at before. In this case, you see we've got the big seller at 10, so right at the whole dollar. It's a huge seller. I mean, that's huge. Now, SRNE has a float that's a little bit higher. Let me just check. SRNE It's a 240 million share float, so it's a little bit higher. But so that's part of it. That's part of the issue there. So I buy at the ask, and my eye is pinned to the ask. So if you had a eye tracker on me, my eye, when I'm watching a stock, is right here and watching the tape. It's right there. Remember, as I said, charts are historical. So if I look at a stock like CHCI, the charts are historical price action. This is what's happened in the past. Now, based on what's happened in the past, I might say if this can get above 1197, it would be bullish. It would start to look stronger. Okay, that's fine. So if I'm watching then for 1197, I'm going to pull this up. Maybe I'll put my order up at $12, for instance. And I'm going to be watching right here. I want to see if that number, comes up to 80, 90, and if it's moving quickly. I've tried looking only at the bid when I'm in a trade, and then once again, I feel so confused. So it tells me that my eye is right here at the ask, and then in my peripheral, I see the green or the red going through. But my eye is right here. My eye is here because I buy at the ask. Now, if I want to get in immediately, I have to buy at the ask. If we use the NASDAQ or we can use NASDAQ test stock here. So NASDAQ test stock, just as the example, or GME, it's fine. This is the simulator. So if I want to buy this right now and I put an order at the bid, I could be a buyer at the bid and I have to sit and I have to wait. And I have to twiddle my thumbs and I have to wait for someone to come and sell me shares. Remember, every time an order goes through, every time a transaction goes through, there's both a buyer and a seller. Okay, so in this case, I've put out my order, which means I'm adding liquidity to the market. We'll talk about that in a second. And I'm waiting for someone to come and take that from me. So at this point, I just have to sit and wait. Now, if I really believe in the stock and I like it, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to say I'm going to buy it right now at 85. Boom, I'm in. And so in that instance, I'm taking liquidity. I'm taking from the market. I saw something I wanted to buy it at that price. There was a seller at 85 on the ask. I gave him the price he wanted, and now I'm in at 85. So I always buy at the ask. And as I see it moving up, I'm watching the ask. So now maybe here I'd say, I'd add over, 88.90, for the break of 56 or something like that, just, for instance. So I'm always looking at the ask. Now I'll glance at the bid and see, we've got a 18-cent spread here. That's not great. I'll glance at the bid to see, do we have a big buyer? Is there something here that's helping prop up this trade? So I glance at it and I look at the tape. It's stalled out here. There's nothing going through. So this is not great. 1,000 shares at 63, 70, now 75. But now, the ask has come down. So in this case, I'll just hit the bid and bail out at 70 and take the loss of, whatever it is, 150 bucks. But my eye is right here. So when I want to buy, I buy at the ask. Now, when I want to turn around and sell, usually I'm going to try to sell on the ask as well because I'm going to try to get the best price. So, if I'm holding shares or, so in this case, let's say I'm holding at 75, I'll put my order right at 75, sell at 75. I'll get the best price. But I've got to wait for someone to come and buy my shares. Now, if the market is strong and we're seeing lots of green going through on the tape, I shouldn't have to wait very long. There'll probably be someone that buys my shares right up. So I'll get the best price. Now, the problem is if I sell on the bid right here, you know what's going to happen? The tape is going to show a red order. So now, let's say I just sell half. If I sell half, I'm sort of feeding this red order to the tape. And I'm still holding a position. So I'm hurting the position that I'm holding by showing this weakness, which is red on the tape. Now, one order of red, it's not that big of a deal. But psychologically, I don't want to do that. I always want to be selling on the ask. Now, again, if I absolutely can't get filled on the ask, I'll hit the bid. If I'm in a loser and it's dropping, I'll hit the bid. I'm not saying I won't. We'll talk about it more when we get into hotkeys and certainly when you see live trading examples. But generally, my eye is pinned to the ask. I buy at the ask and I also try to sell at the ask. So a common question here is, Russ, how long does it take to learn level 2 to get good at reading it? Well, it's not days, it's probably not weeks, it's probably months. I would say 3 to 6 months, probably at a minimum. But I would say you'll also only get better in time. At this point, I don't know that I've gotten any better at reading level 2 in the last several years, to be honest. I think that, you kind of get to a level and then you're kind of there. Maybe I have, but I'm not sure that I have. I would say I probably learned 90% of everything I needed to learn in my first 2 years, and then incrementally picked up little things a little further down the road. Oh, hey, this does this. Oh, interesting. This, just little things like that. But nothing, nothing big. Well, I don't know. I don't think so, anyways. I guess I can't say for sure. It's hard to say. But I would say, you know, for the next 3 to 6 months, every time you're sitting and trading and you're watching the level 2 and you're hearing, you know, commentary either from me or from other traders that are commenting on the price action of the stock, you will continue to get better. So gaining that time in the chair is gaining experience. So you want to just stick with it. And at first it is a little confusing. You don't know which way to look, and it just starts to, at a certain point, click. So, all right, with that, we're going to continue on with Chapter 6, Part 2. All right, everyone, so we're going to continue on here with Chapter 6, Part 2 on time and sales, aka tape reading. So the expression tape reading, as I talked about in the starter, comes from the old ticker tape machines, which would print out the quotes on kind of a reel of paper that looked like a tape dispenser, and it would come out, and you would see the quote of the latest quote of the stock. So I'm just going to give you a brief refresher of what we talked about in the starter, and then we're going to get into some of the more, we're going to get into order routing, hotkeys, then we'll get into live trading examples. There's not a whole lot more to add here, but I just thought I'd at least just include this. So generally what I'm looking for is just the color of the print. To be honest, that's the main thing. The size of the transaction, I usually don't even have a chance to truly look at. And the time, I only use as a reference for when a stock is halted, knowing that it resumes 5 minutes later. So I'm really not super concerned about the transaction size or the time. It's mostly the color that I'm focusing on and those bursts of red and green. So the color of the print. Next to the level 2 window is our time and sales window right here, as you can see. So that's set up in sterling, just like this. It's also set up in light speed and kind of this sort of the way it's buried in here like that, which is fine. It's a little small. I actually like sterling a little bit better because you see a little bit more, but it's fine. So in sterling, the way the color scheme is set up, if I go here to view and then settings, colors. So below the bid, if an order is a market order and it starts filling a little bit below the bid, it's just like a selling, it's bright red. If it's just at the bid, it's kind of a lighter red. If it's a mid-market, so between the bid and the ask, it's white. If it's at the ask, it's green. If it's above the ask, it's bright green. So that's the color theme. Now, they do have irregular orders, which I always change to white, and then I forget to save my layout. So that's the way the orders will look. So if we pull up CHCI, which has a little bit more volume, not a lot, CHCI. We'll see, you know, these transactions going through right now in white, but you see some in green, and we may see a market order of someone who sells and it goes through in bright red, or a market order of a buyer that's in bright green. On light speed, it's essentially the same, except that the bright red is actually like that. So the background is red and the text is white. And we're not able to change that. That's just the way it is. Now, for some reason, this shows that at 65. This one didn't show that same order, which is kind of weird. Usually they would, but this is pre-market, so sometimes pre-market, you know, it's going to be a little funny. But in any case, as we see more volume come in, we'd start to see some more of the predictable flow of the level 2. So generally, that's what I'm looking at. I'm looking for bursts of green. If I'm thinking about being a buyer, just in that example that I showed you in part 1, this right here is we get that breakthrough. So let's watch this, 44. This is the tape now, and we're gonna start to see a lot of green orders. There we go. And you saw some market order, that market order burst that was at 60. That was probably someone, if I was gonna be honest, who intended to be getting filled at 50, but their order filled with slippage. So it filled high at 60, and you know that's the way it goes. So sometimes if you're not fast enough, if you're not a little early on these, you're late, and then you miss the move, and you're getting in too high. So to add to this, on the transaction size, one thing that's interesting is most orders, most smart routing, but even actually at this point, even NASDAQ and EDGX and ARCA, they'll break your order out into these little blocks. So a 10,000 share order could be, you know, a ton of 100, 200 share blocks. And when you actually take the trades, you'll see, so like right here, this actually shows in here the way the orders are kind of filling. So see how it filled kind of in these little increments. And now when I turn around and sell it, so let's see. So let's watch. So it's probably going to add in a full block. So it added to the full block. That was no problem. But now as I'm selling, see how it's taking out little pieces? It's taking out these little pieces like that. So that's very common, just in the way the orders go through. Now, part of that is because, obviously it's partial fill as I'm on the ask, I'm waiting for someone to buy my shares. But if that person's bought their shares with a 2,000 share smart route order, or even really probably any route, it's going to fill in 100 little share blocks. So I don't exactly know why that is the case, but the result is that the tape usually is lots of small orders. So that's fine, but you might think, well, who's buying all these 100 share blocks? And they're not probably doing that. It's just the way the orders are getting executed. And also rest assured that if you place an order for 5,000 shares and you fill in 50 100 share blocks, you still only pay the one commission. The routing, breaks it up how they break it up, but you get charged for each ticket. So each time you press that buy button. And then those bursts of green or red are what we really look at as signs of bullishness. And again, these are only really relevant when we're looking at a stock that is the leading gainer on the day, high relative volume, moving quickly, and kind of meets all of our criteria for being in play. Now, something that's kind of interesting is at 8 a.m. every morning, and it's actually coming up to 8 a.m. right now. We're going to see, what perfect timing. We're going to see institutional orders start to go through. So let's pull up, let me pull up CHCI. And what we're going to see, oh, there's my alarm. Look at all these orders going through. 11:55. Look at it. What in the world is happening? I didn't time this. I didn't time this. It's just this perfect timing. This meant this is exactly what we were supposed to be doing this morning. So all of those orders right there are going through on the alternative display network. So the alternative display network is used by institutions, and these are usually late prints. So they start showing them at 8 a.m. and these would be late prints that went through early pre-market, but didn't get reported until 8 a.m. So they get reported in bulk. So you see that bulk volume right there at that moment. And I have another example, but I don't need to show it. This was a perfect example of it. So that's what it is. It's right at 8 a.m. However, we're seeing it continue here. And sometimes you will see it continue throughout pre-market. It almost never occurs during regular trading hours. During regular trading hours, we don't usually see prints out of sequence. We have a couple of times, but it's not common. So usually once the market opens, this isn't an issue, but it is an issue pre-market. And the result is that this can confuse traders, because you look at the chart and you're like, oh my God, look at that huge red volume candle. What's happening? Look at that big doji. And that's the pattern that's created. Now, I would argue that perhaps Lightspeed should not even be showing these to us, because they're completely useless in that these are late prints. What am I supposed to do with this information? And so TD Ameritrade and E-Trade, I believe they filter them out and they don't even show them to you. But Lightspeed shows them to you. Of course, they're more of a professional trading platform. eSignal includes them in their charts. So, some people will see them. So if you're on a platform that shows them, now you know what they are. And you can learn more about them on this link right here, as long as this one's still valid when you're checking. But it's the Alternative Display Facility, I guess, ADF. So they don't adhere to the National Best Bid and Offer, as the trades could be late reports, negotiated trades, or block trades, or other conditions. So I had to ask my broker about it, because I was like, dude, what is going on? Now, this was a day at 9:42 where we were actually seeing them during regular trading hours, which was really uncommon. But all of a sudden we saw, and this is the exchange, ADFN, so that's the Alternative Display Network, and we were seeing these prints going through at $40. And the current price is $39.88. And the result was these really weird-looking charts. That was very strange, and they said that there was an issue. There was some market data issue on that day, but this is more like what we see pre-market. So seeing it during regular trading hours was very unusual. So I thought I would include that for you guys. It's not something you'll typically see, but well, I guess actually it depends on your platform. You might see it every single morning at 8 a.m. and then it will be pretty typical. It's not typical to see it during regular trading hours. So that's a little nuance on the tape that if you see it now, but you don't have to worry about it too much. So this was sent over from Lightspeed. I asked about the specific stock, and he's like, yeah, this is what it is. And he said it's a regular trade. Form U means it's out of sequence trade. So the condition of Form U on the right side indicates the trades were done out of sequence. They have longer periods of time to be obligated to report the trades after they occur. Now, obviously there's a question of, well, so when that trade occurred, it was a match, you know, so the whole buy and sell, the whole transaction was kind of, you know, somewhere else. And so that gets into what we'll talk about in a second, which is dark pools of liquidity. And some of the sort of things that go on the side with institutional traders that we as retail traders, you know, kind of have almost no control over. But there are a few ways that we can try to gain some liquidity from the shares that they're holding. So we'll talk about that in the next section.